too far into depth in this video, I just want to give a huge shout out to Mama Stump, Papa Stump. Those are Murr's parents. Both of them have just been really super supportive and donated to the channel and donated throughout the year for some racing parts and stuff like that. And not only did they help me out, they also raised a really fine young man. I think everybody can agree that not only is Meyer one of the hardest working guys I know, but he's just got really good character, and that's really hard to find in today's world. And I just wanted to give a special thank you to both of them. I appreciate it, and it will go to good use. And thanks for watching all the videos. I really do appreciate y'all, and you guys raised a hell of a son. Okay, on today's video, I wanted to answer some of the questions that I've gotten on Instagram. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of go through some of them on some of the topics. And instead of doing them on a story, do them on a video where you can kind of be able to go back to them. So one of the questions we got is a coolant bypass. So a coolant bypass is a fleece product. Okay, so it's a fleece product, and basically what it does on your Cummins, the way the coolant flows through the block, you get some natural hot spots. One of the ones that happens is on cylinder 6. Now there's two issues that these trucks have. Number one, you have really hot coolant temp in the back of the cylinders. Number two, that freeze plug has a lot of square, has a lot of surface area. So when you're running higher RPM, the coolant pressure naturally goes higher because the pump is moving more volume at a higher RPM, and that's one of the susceptible freeze plugs. So number one, it serves as a rear freeze plug, delete or block off plate. Number two, it has a secondary thermostat in the back set at 180 degrees, and what it allows is a coolant alternate path to get out of the engine. They're great on race trucks. Now granted, you can do the pressure bypass ones. I do just prefer the fleece one. Just, it's a nice product. I know it's going to work every time, and I've had really good luck with them, and they also serve as that block off plate in the rear. And then in towing applications, stuff like that, it helps keep your coolant temperatures under control. It also, because of the coolant temperature being more uniform, also gets rid of the potential for a piston to swell in that back cylinder. So that's what a coolant bypass is. All right, I get this question quite often. How do you put a 6.7 Cummins into a 5.9 truck? Well, it's actually really simple. What you're gonna do is, number one, you need to decide, and this is where builds take different paths. If you already have a set of 5.9 injectors that you want to use for your new build, that depends on the spray pattern. So let's say you have a 06 truck or an 07 truck and you already have injectors. Well, in order to get that to work, you're going to need to run a QSB bull piston. If you're buying new injectors at the same time, unless you're going to a sled point application where you're air limited, the ISB or on-road piston or factory 6.7 piston is inherently stronger, and it's able to take a little bit more heat because the bowl is has a little bit more girth on there, and the way the piston, the way the fuel burns, it doesn't put a hot spot on the outside. A QSB burns from inside out, and what that means is, because of the bowl design, number one, the crown's very thin, and number two, with the way the fuel burns, you're eligible to have some hot spots on that side, especially if you have fly cuts. That gives it kind of a way to get into that piston a little quicker. But essentially what you're going to do is you're going to put obviously a 6.7 block in there, and you can either use your existing 5.9 head or get a 6.7 head. It's very easy. Put the head gasket on the head, and from there all you do is just drill the stream ports into your 5.9 head. On the exhaust side, it drills a little harder, so get ready, because I broke a couple of bits that way. Just, it bites really hard. And then I recommend using a 6.7 oil cooler. It does have an extra plate. You're gonna go ahead and run your 5.9 adapter plate. So if you had a 48RE or G56, whatever adapter plate came on your 5.9 truck, you're gonna use on the 6.7 block. And then it's up to you. You could run a 5.9 rail or a 6.7 rail. David Petrick, buddy of mine, he has that blue truck, 8-year Duramax, on Instagram, did 2,200 horsepower on a 5.9 rail. Obviously, as you guys have seen in my 05, I have a 6.7 rail, so you could go either way. The downside of the 6.7 rail that I've found is I've broke a lot more lines because of it. So you can do either or. And then you're just going to run a 6.7 crank, your choice of rods. Obviously, you could use stock rods, you could do 12 valve rods, you could do billet rods. Basically, pick the rods that are suitable for your build. Then you're going to run a 6.7 damper or a fluid damper of the 6.7 variety because they are a little heavier. And then you're going to run whatever cam you so choose. I assume most people that are doing this are going to be putting a built engine in, so obviously pick the hard parts for your horsepower goal. And then you just run the 5.9 harness with the 5.9 computer that your truck came with, and you get a tuner that knows what piston bowl design you have and what injector spray pattern you have, and you're pretty much golden. The motor mounts from your truck will bolt to it. Even on a second gen, the second gen mounts will still bolt to a common rail block. So you're going to run whatever truck you have motor mounts on that block. But it's actually really, really simple. There's a couple other differences, but for the most part, they're almost identical inside, with the exception of bore and stroke. So one of those things I think that it's very overcomplicated, and it's actually really easy to do. And yeah, I mean, obviously, for those of you that want to know how to build a 6.7, one of my really early videos that's probably not that good to watch, I went through it a little bit there. So if you need some tips and tricks, stuff like that, I do have that available for you guys. But that's how you put a 6.7 truck into a 5.9 originally equipped truck. How to acquire sponsorships. So being that I work at Power Driven Diesel, I get approached by a lot of people, and it has kind of tailored how I go about it. So number one, what is in it for them? That's always what I ask. And I don't mean to be selfish, but America was not founded on people getting stuff for free. You have to work for it. And I have sponsored guys through Power Driven Diesel that have had tiny followings, but I could see what they were trying to do. And I've turned away guys with 600,000 subscribers on YouTube because I didn't align with their character. So number one, research the company that you want to sponsor you. You need to know kind of a general guideline of probably who's the owner, where they're located, what their specialty is, and how you can use their parts in a way that will highlight their business. I found I don't want to go into ethics and character, but having similar values to the owners or the people you deal with is important, like profanity and some of the more borderline, I'm not going to judge people for what they do off work or what they do in their personal life, but if you're going to an event to sponsor a company, I would highly recommend not having a lot of alcohol involved, any drug use, stuff like that. I mean, when I go to research somebody that's asking for our help, I'm going on their Facebook, I'm going on their Instagram, I'm going on whatever social media outlet I can to try to figure out what kind of person they are. And it's not age dependent. I mean, I think the first company that really helped me out, I was like 20 years old. So you don't have to be really old to get a sponsorship, and be realistic. Kind of have a goal in mind. And even some of the sponsors that I currently have between the trucks and even the ones on this 07 build, like sometimes it's the knowledge that is worth something to me, like only having to buy the part one time because you got to speak to them and you got their time. And I can tell you, as a father, as a husband, as somebody that works and is trying to do this YouTube thing, time is my most valuable asset now, especially as I've gotten older. So if a business owner is willing to give you their time to help you, like that should mean something to you. Not everything needs to be free. And that gets me to my next point. Don't expect anything for free. There's no such thing as a free lunch, right? Somebody's paying for it. So if a company's willing to give you cost on it, just know they're losing profit on that part in hopes that you will generate enough revenue in your future endeavors to cover the cost of that part and justify it. So having realistic expectations of, if a company's willing to give you 15% off, 20% off, or a part at cost, be grateful. And if you can't afford it, just be open. I don't want to highlight any company, but Manton Push Rods, the owner Trevor, always has been trying to help me out. And there's been times where I'm just like, Trevor, like I just can't afford this right now. Like I'm not appreciative. I can't afford it, but I will come back to you. And that's okay too. just having an open conversation with them. And then if you do have a social media following, you need to have that data available and be willing to share it with that company. And one of the biggest things is like screenshots of analytics. Like Instagram lets you kind of see who your audience is, male, female, ages, locations, stuff like that. And that's vital to a company. If you're a guy that advertises really or trends really well on social media in their demographic or in their geological location, that is sometimes more valuable than how many people you have, but that target audience. Not to have a big ego or anything like that, but I don't have the biggest Instagram following, but the people that follow me are genuine performance enthusiasts. I don't have fancy wheels and tires and these flashy SEMA builds. I have purpose-built competition or purpose-built fun street trucks, and they're relatable to people, and that helps greatly. Experience is another one. You want to be able to represent their product in a way that other consumers can understand. Being able to take their product, talk about it intelligently, and portray a confidence into other people. Prime example is the Wagler Street Fighter rods that I always throw shout outs to. Well, number one, I think they're a great rod at a great price, but I know the details of them and I understand the product and the place it has in this industry, and just having that really helps. And another prime example is having a company that's willing to stick with you even when times are bad. As most of you know, 2020 for me was just kicking the family jewels all day long. Like every time we went out, it was something. And the sponsors that I have were just like, what can we do to help? How can we get this back on the road? They didn't throw in the towel. And again, like our team that I have on my truck, like I couldn't do it without them, number one. So a huge thank you to all those guys. But just having that perseverance, like to me, having somebody come up to us and being like, I don't know how you guys did that. Like that was a lot of work. Those are almost better than the trophies and the first place prizes. That struggle to get there sometimes is it's a better story. It's a better experience. And I could have won KOS and never wrenched, and I would probably remember it. But what we went through at King of the Street, like those are memories that will never leave my brain. Like I can't believe how much adversity we overcame. Obviously in the end it didn't work out well for us anyway, but just taking it with a positive attitude and a smile on our faces and just enjoying it was very memorable. And lastly, on the sponsor, like once you get the parts, your job is not over. Now your part of the agreement is there. I'm not saying you have to kiss the ground they walk on, but tagging them in posts, recommending them to other consumers in the industry, and giving real reviews. Nothing sucks more than looking at a review where a guy was like, fit great, worked awesome. Whereas if you're like, hey, I installed this turbo from this company, this is what I saw, lower EGTs, higher boost pressures, better number on the dyno, I gained 0.2 of a second at the track, I 60-footed better. Those are real world data that's not only beneficial to your audience, but it's beneficial to that company. They might even repost what you said, and it helps them advertise and justify them to keep coming back and backing you. To me, sponsors aren't one-time deals. Like you build a relationship. The relationships I have with Gordon Lindemood doing my tuning, like phenomenal. Dynamite Diesel, like Lenny, Skyler, and Matt over there, like those guys always take care of me. Kevin at AirDog, like I know I can hit him up with anything I need, and I don't even care if I have to pay for it. Just being able to have that relationship. Ethan over at Yukon and Evan at Diamond, like all these companies, like you become familiar with their product, you become familiar with them, and it really helps push you forward into the next level or the next dyno class or the next ET class, and it just helps you progress. And some of them turn out to be mentors. Again, I'm not trying to make this really long, but the sponsorship with Dynamite Diesel that I have has been one of the most impactful besides Power Driven. Like I look up to Lenny. I view him as one of those people that I can look to. Even a prime example, coronavirus hit, and I talked to Lenny, and he's like, you just got to give America its chance to rebound. And later that day, I bought everything I needed for the triple turbos and a couple other things. And I was just like, if a guy I admire is willing to inspire that much confidence, like, he's right. I do need to not save my money that I was going to spend anyway and just put it back in the economy and help other people. Like, you get those mentorships through some of these companies, and they can really help you not only in your professional life and in your diesel life, but also your family life and stuff like that. Some of these guys I really do look up to, and I take their advice not only for diesel motorsports, but I apply it to everyday life. So hopefully that kind of makes sense on sponsorships. Again, Facebook Messenger, Instagram, probably not your best methods to reach out. Emails, phone calls, those would probably be, at least for me when I'm doing sponsorship packages, that's to me like, okay, they were willing to sit down at a computer and type me a formal email. It says a lot about your professionalism, just like a phone call. Again, it just says a lot about your professionalism. And just be grateful, even if they don't decide to sponsor you, don't burn a bridge, because you never know, they might change their mind later. And don't take it personal. For every 100 no's, you might get one yes, but that one yes is going to feel pretty damn good. Question. Different rods for different uses. That is a very broad question, and I'm going to do my best to answer it in a reasonable amount of time. You have your factory rods, which the 12 valve forged rods are very strong. They're one of the strongest factory rods in my opinion. Again, I don't know everything, so if you guys have questions or question what I'm saying, please ask. I'm more than happy to go into it, and I'll even admit if I'm wrong. Like, I'm not perfect. But those rods in a 5.9 application, 750, 800, yes, they can go a lot further. I went to 1300, but again, I'm trying to talk reliable, safe numbers, and I just don't want to set somebody up for failure. There's plenty of guys that do 1,000 horsepower plus. I've done close to 1,500 in a 12 valve with them. So they do have their uses. Number one upgrade is definitely rod bolts. That's the weak part of a 12 valve rod. I guess a pro of a 12 valve rod is usually they bend and the motor will have a hard time starting long before they break. So again, I guess you could say maybe 1,000, and it depends to compounds or triples or big single. The lower the torque number, the torque rating on those rods, in my opinion, a safe zone 1,600. 1,800, you're really getting dangerous. 2,000, you're just waiting for them to break. So hopefully that kind of answers that one. Common rail fractured cap rods, again, they are a PMR rod with a fractured cap, so they're cast all together. They break the rod and put them together. In a 5.9, again, I've seen guys do 1,000. I mean, even I did 1,004 horsepower on a stock bottom end 5.9 before, but it was a single turbo. We did it on nitrous. And kind of a really big injector setup, low pulse width, low injection timing, that really helped. And that's a really hard question as well, because a guy doing 1,000 horsepower with 100% over with a ton of injection timing, whether it's a P pump or a common rail, I don't know why you'd have common rail rods on a 12 valve, but either way, a lot of injection timing adds a lot of it's a very lazy burn, and it's very hard on the internal engine parts, whereas running a bigger injector with a lower pulse width, you don't need to run as much crank timing to get it in there. So again, that's a hard one. I'd say in a 5.9, like anything past 850, like it's just a matter of time. And then in a 6.7, like I slung a rod out of my block, as most of you saw on my tow truck, right around the 750 horsepower level, and what it ended up being was a rod bolt failure. However, anytime you look on Instagram or Facebook or any of the forums, like it's very common to see guys that break 6-7 rods and they usually exit out the driver's side. You hope they miss the ECM and stuff, but that's where they normally go. So on a 6.7, I'd say like 650, 700. Again, I know guys have done 1,000 horsepower. I'm just trying to give you solid recommendations so that later on, if you do have a failure, I'm not the one that was like, yeah, go ahead. I get a lot of calls and texts and messages. Like, people just want permission to do something that's not going to end well. And when I was younger and more, I guess, tight on money and stuff, I would send stock parts way farther than they belonged, and I got very lucky for a long time. Some people aren't that lucky, and I just want you to have the facts. Then you move into your like upgraded rods. The first step is a shop peen 12 valve rod. They shop peen and polish them in order to make them a little stronger. Again, I don't think that is a race truck solution, although Bodie Armstrong is a guy down in Texas. I know he had shop peen 12 valve rods in his race truck for a long time and never had any issues. I believe it was like a big compound or a big single setup, so keeping the torque out of them will keep a 12 valve rod alive a lot longer. Moving up from there, you have your Wagler Street Fighters, which for under $2,000, coming with a 1/2 inch ARP L19 rod bolt that has a torque value of 135 foot-pounds, you have a ton of cap clamp load. And then they also have their nice diamond lock cap that helps it from fretting. And fretting is where, like, if this is the rod, it's going like this, and you'll see a bunch of marring happen on the outside edges. That's what's called fretting. That happens when the rod bolt can no longer hold the rod in, and it starts to kind of chatter. And it's a great rod at the price. I think, at least when I'm recording this video, we've made the most power on them. We did 1,683 horsepower, 2,498 foot-pounds, and we stopped because we were already past the manufacturer's recommended horsepower value. Moving up from there, you kind of have your more, I don't want to say cheap, but the lower price spectrum. You have your Apex triple beams, you have your Pro Max rods, you have your standard duty Carrillos. I'm sure I'm missing a couple others, but those ones, again, they're solid rods. Just look at, a lot of them have RPM limits because most of those rods I just listed off use a 7/16 bolt, and they don't have quite the nice doweling on the cap. So again, just choose the right rod for your application there. I think most of those usually have a cap around 2,000 horsepower. And then you have your premier line of rods. You have the Wagler billet ones, which are obviously one of my personal favorites, and they are available in 1 inch, 80 thousandths, and standard length. You have your Carrillo HDs, which come with the better rod bolt. You have your I guess upgraded Apex triple beams with the better rod bolt. They put a 625 custom aged bolt in there. Again, it's still a 7/16, so I don't think they're quite as strong. Again, I'm not trying to slam them, just my personal opinion out for you guys to listen to. You have your Hazley billet rods that are definitely very strong, and then you have your D&J rods. I luckily got the experience to go to D&J Precision Machine and meet Drew and his crew. A great group of guys. I don't know if he gives out tours to just anybody, but we had an appointment set up for him. And his lubed wrist pin, again, I haven't ever ran them, but judging by the success that some of the people I know of that have their motors, like the Fire Punk crew, especially like Cody Fisher, I think his truck went like 850s at a full weight street truck. I mean, that's just incredible, and it really just speaks to the craftsmanship, not only of the rod, but that whole motor. So D&J has that lube hole that goes all the way through. I believe Hazley does as well. I think those are the only two rods that I'm aware of that will do that. Again, I could be wrong. So that's kind of a breakdown of the rods, and those are all, I think most of those Premier series are rated at right around 3,000 horsepower. And being realistic, 3,000 horsepower is, I mean, nobody's hit it yet on a chassis dyno. And I think the rod technology has kind of, I don't want to say stalled, but it's kind of put on pause because now we're having more tranny issues, we're having block issues. The rods aren't really the issue anymore. A lot of companies have great success. So bottom line, find out what your budget is, and then find out what power you want to make, and see if those two coincide, and then pick the right rod. Hopefully I helped shed a little light on this for you guys. Last question for this week's segment, transmissions. Who's the best builder and why? Obviously, I'm going to say Power Driven Diesel. I work here. This was the first product I ever bought from this company, and they have treated me well enough to not only keep my business, but I've also now become an employee of them. Realistically, there are a lot of great transmission builders. Power Driven obviously has a special place in my heart. You have Randy's Transmissions up in northern Utah. You have Ultimate Transmissions in Idaho. You have Nixon Transmissions in California. You have Logan Built Transmissions in Kentucky. You have the BD units. They obviously have a lot more stock and stuff. You can order just a full tranny through a wholesale distributor. You have ATS in Colorado. You also have transmission builders like Suncoast down in Florida. They're a huge company. RevMax, again, another huge company. And then you have some smaller shops that do great work. The number one thing I say when building a transmission, number one, find somebody close to you. The closer the better, because ultimately, if you're into racing or sled pulling or just doing hoonigan stuff on the street, transmissions don't last forever. They are legitimately a wearable item. There are clutches and bands in there that have a lifespan. Ultimately, you're going to have some issues, and the closer you are to that transmission builder, the better it is for you to get it taken care of. And that's how I ended up at Power Driven's. Why I bought one from them. They were only 5 hours away. To me, that was very close where I used to live. But again, the big things you're looking for, number one, you want to be able to talk to people about it. Ordering from somebody that only has a website, no phone number, probably not the best bet. Especially with the cost of transmissions, whether it's a 48, a 47, or a 68, an Aisin, a 4R100, I mean, you guys get the drift. These are expensive transmissions. I mean, even stock remans are $3,000. That's a lot of money to people. Some of these performance transmissions go $15,000, $16,000. And you want to make sure like you are comfortable with your purchase. If they're not giving you straight answers, I probably wouldn't buy from them. Because it's an investment into the truck. And realistically, you're going to have different stages. I know, another company, I don't even know why I didn't think about them, Muldoon's Diesel up in the Northeast. You have Fire Pump in Ohio, which I don't know how I could figure out those guys. Fire Pump in Ohio. You have Patterson Diesel. He's in like the kind of Midwest area, I believe. But anyway, most companies are going to get into a billet single disc, billet triple disc, billet quad disc. Then you're going to have a variety of different billet shafts. Tell them what you want to do with it. Don't lie to them. Just tell them. Like when I bought my tranny from Power Driven, I was like, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to do burnouts anytime I want. I want to be able to sled pull, dirt drag, drag race, tow a trailer. That's a hard transmission to build. Just keep that in mind. But they've been able to keep one alive for me extremely well. And listen to them. There's a reason why you trust them, and they're not going to misguide you. And if there's one piece of advice I can give to you on a tranny, overbuild it. I always end up getting an all billet shaft transmission because I know eventually all trucks lead to 1,000 horsepower, at least if I own them long enough. So that's kind of a heads up for you guys. And then everyone has a different opinion on shafts. You have the Sandra shaft, you have the Sonics 35 spline, you have the TCS fat shaft, the DPC fat shaft, you have the 300M material, you have the Aramint material. There's actually a really good video on Logan Built's YouTube channel, what shaft is right for me, and he kind of goes through them all. Logan's definitely, and you'll find a lot of companies have their favorites. Like Power Driven, we use a lot of DPC converters, TCS shafts. Logan uses a lot of Goren shafts and a lot of Goren converters. Suncoast is obviously going to use all their Suncoast parts. So whatever that builder is comfortable with are the parts that you're going to ultimately end up with. And all I can tell you from my experience is Diesel Performance Converters out in Georgia builds one hell of a converter. Phil is an amazing guy to do business with, especially when it came to warranties and stuff and getting the converter back to me in a timely fashion. And I've had really good luck with TCS shafts. I'm not knocking anybody else's billet input shafts, but the fat shaft that I have in my 05 is from Phil over at DPC. I've been going on 3 years and I still haven't twisted it yet. And Phil told me to break it. He's like, I want you to break this shaft. And I haven't been able to yet. So that's all I could say is I've had really good luck with that shaft. I run a TCS. They call it the Big Daddy output. It's the fat shaft. So you have to run a manual input shaft on your transfer case. And then I run a, I'm probably going to say this wrong, but a 300 Miraging intermediate, which is the fancy billet one. They're like $1,000 retail, I think. And I've had really good luck with all those parts. And then each company is going to have their own clutch brand and stuff like that. At Power Driven, we use a lot of GPZs, and I've had really good luck with the GPZ clutches. I remember when I first was getting started, the red Altos were really popular, and now a lot of companies I know, like Firepunk, I believe Muldoon, our company, I believe Randy, a lot of the companies have switched to those GPZ clutches. They seem to do better. And the biggest thing on a transmission is don't beat on them when they're cold. They're just like an engine. You got to kind of let them warm up a little bit. And number two, do the service. If you're using this as a daily driver and you're not really hard on it, it's a low power truck, the 40,000 or 25,000 mile or whatever the builder recommends interval for fluid and filter is important. That is not something you can just stretch out. The quickest way to destroy an automatic transmission, don't fill it up all the way on install. Don't get the flex plate on the crank straight so the converter wobbles and wipes out the seal. And missing service intervals, plugging the filter, that will destroy a transmission so quick. Is going over the interval, you get a lot of debris in the filter starts to get plugged, you lose fluid into the pump can't make any pressure because there's no volume going to it. And once the transmission's low on pressure, it is a very quick decline. You lose line pressure, clutches slip, bands don't apply when they should, overdrive starts to get smoked. It'll destroy a transmission in a very short amount of time. And whatever the builder recommends for fluid, for filters, for that interval change, you bought a transmission from them, you invested in their company, in their product. Just do what they ask you to do, and your product will probably last a lot longer. I know at Power Driven, most transmissions, we have a break-in period, where you drop the pan, look at the filter, and if you have questions or you're concerned about what you see in there, we have a text line, an email, and a phone number. Call, text, send pictures in so we can look at it and either be like, hey, that's wrong, we need to look at that, or hey, that's totally acceptable, change the fluid, change the filter, tighten the bands, and have a good day. And on the 68s, I'm still learning a lot on the 68s, but what I can tell you is tuning. Make sure you have a good tuner, and make sure the tuner knows what parts are in your transmission, and make sure you let it learn itself. Every time you flash a tune, you have to do a quick, or hopefully you can do a quick relearn. But basically for the first 200 miles, you need to let that transmission figure out the CVIs, which is the clutch volume index. It needs to figure out how much or where the clutches sit at, and also how the driver is going to do it. So obviously my 2011 gets driven around like a gosh dang hot rod because America. Give it time to figure itself out before you just lay the old hammer down. Hopefully that answered some of your guys' questions on transmissions. I'm going to wrap this one up. This is a really long talking video. Again, I'm going to try to sprinkle these in every once in a while with questions I get that I feel like I can handle and give valuable feedback on. Drop some comments below on what questions you want to tackle next. I saw a lot about horsepower builds, XYZ. I need some details to add context to my advice. So hopefully you guys like this video. Like, subscribe, comment, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.